Hey, Pat and Doug here with another episode of the Wealthy Gym Owners. And today we're going to talk about really everything leading up to the grand opening of Doug's new gym. So, Doug, let's just start to unpack it. Where do we begin?
I would say let's start with the thought of a second location. So just for context, for those that aren't aware, I started our first location here in Southern Maine back in 2012 and ran it all the way up through 2024. So ran it for 12 years and had I would call him an A player. He wasn't an official partner, but very much grew from intern to, coach to head coach to manager. And so his name was Josh, and he was in a position, we were both in a position where I was able to sell that location to him and kind of took some time off to dive deeper into our stuff that we do, and kind of presented with this idea of what does it feel like to not own a gym and coach gym owners. And I think went back and forth on that, and I see both sides of it. And Josh also had 6 months to a year of running the gym without me, and realized that that location was, and what he paid for, frankly, was a full capacity, maximized single location brick and mortar training gym. And so we both kind of, with his initial kickstart, presented the idea of, hey, let's see if we can model this through multiple locations. So that was kind of the general thought process to kick it off. But I thought it was interesting to share. For over a decade, I was like very much against multiple locations, just because I was nervous of we see it, I think, often where folks expand too quickly and then they're just running around to the multiple locations and bouncing between the two, and they've essentially just doubled their workload and see their family less, can't make it to their kids stuff. And I fortunately had a pretty good lifestyle the last really 5 years of the gym ownership, and then certainly the year after the sale, where I could be to everything with my kids, and had a really good schedule. And so I didn't want to sacrifice that. So that was kind of the thought process, and maybe the barriers that I wanted, or the guardrails that I wanted to have, as we built out the second one.
Yeah, I think that sometimes people view constraints as a bad thing. Frankly, I think they're great, right? Like I think that we do better with deadlines. We get more creative. We become better problem solvers. And that kind of leads to maybe the next constraint that it fits here is, I mean, your first location was a much bigger footprint. Um, let's talk about what you wanted to do with the second location as far as size, scope, all of that.
Yeah, so our first location, which I'm now back in as minority owner, which I think is important to note, just because there's certainly some things that we carry over from that first location with the longevity of a 12-year-old business. Um, and so that business was, from a training gym perspective, pretty large, right? I mean, we're talking almost 400 clients, 10 staff, many different moving pieces, as far as full timers, part timers, multiple admins, large group training, but predominantly small group training. Lots of, as gym owners know, lots of good and bad come with history of clients, right? So you got long retention of clients, good retention of clients, but that comes with, they always kind of have some nostalgia with how things used to be. And so, I think many of us, if we were to do it all over again, there's certain things we would do differently. And what I looked at personally was the what I might call technically as like the net owner benefit, or the personal upside, to a gym owner, and looked at and said, how can I get basically the same net owner benefit with a much simpler model, and frankly, hopefully fewer headaches. So the model that we kind of ran with was a small footprint, so less than 2,000 square feet. We ended up not intentionally going this small, but we ended up with just shy of 1,500 square feet, which is small. It's very as folks that are in that range know, it's tight, and it's small in the sense of the model is what some of the guardrails that we wanted to have in place were two staff. So it's going to be just two full-time coaches. So and they're going to run in tandem. So one will run, on the hour at say 5:30, 6:30, 7:30. The other will run on, the opposing 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. So they're running in tandem. But the other thing that I think is maybe unique is we're running morning only sessions. So we're running from 5:30 in the morning till 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and then shutting it down. And that was, I think, important to note because one, looking at the stereotypically, there's always exceptions, but stereotypically, the type of clients that come earlier in the morning tend to have less maybe influences outside of life or outside of work, outside of maybe that they're retired. They don't have all these other commitments. And so, or they're getting up super early and they tend to be a little bit more consistent as opposed to, again, stereotypically, we saw a large percentage of our evening clients were a little bit more flaky. And then staffing obviously was a big part of it. Having had a pretty, for training gym standards, a pretty significant team size, wanted to try a much smaller team. And certainly we have some concerns with that culturally, but a much smaller team to keep that simple.
So, I mean, you've kind of mapped out a pretty cool new mousetrap here, and I just love it because I just think most people don't reverse engineer the outcome they want, right? And when you talked about net owner benefit, like that is almost the precise opposite of the way that most people do gyms, right? Like most people are like, well, let's try to grow this thing so it makes enough top line that maybe it spits off enough for me to reach my personal financial goals. And so that's pretty awesome. Let's talk the going from idea, model, conception to, hey, like we got a space, we're now navigating build out and all that other fun stuff. And we'll do pre-sale in a separate episode.
Yeah, yeah. So I think the other variable that was, maybe not relevant for everybody, but something that I'm quite large on is the kind of double dipping, I guess you can call it. The speaking of net owner benefit, the benefit of owning the real estate. So we were in a unique position to buy the real estate, but have it be basically an empty shell where we could build it out as we saw. So I essentially bought an empty box, no slab, nothing, just a roof and four walls. And we had ended up taking about 6 weeks, which, and I say that out loud now, it sounds like such a short amount of time, but those 6 weeks felt quite long. And there was a lot of, probably another 6 to 8 weeks prior to that of, all the permitting and plans and all that, contractor bids. So we built out everything from, the obviously starting with the floor plan to, getting the sprinkler permit and how many heads we needed per, to make sure the sprinklers are placed in the right area, to obviously lighting plans. From a floor plan perspective, I was pretty picky on making sure it was a rectangle. I think that was another pain point I observed over, the decade plus of talking to training gym owners is if it's not a rectangle, your layout tends to be compromised. Not saying you can't make it work, but I would always hear when a gym owner didn't have a rectangle, they would always be talking about the pain point of flow. So we were able to obtain this rectangle, purchase it, and built it out as we saw fit, which was basically, another thing I would always hear from gym owners, which I faced as well in our first location is, okay, you're paying for, say, 3,000 square feet as an example. But I'll always hear them say, well, usable space is only 2,000. And it's like, okay, well, you're paying for 3,000. And so I think the idea of building out was enticing to me because I mean, really, all 1457, as every square foot had a purpose as we built it out, and there was no wasted space. So build out was happening. Other things that we're navigating, of course, is making sure we're getting it fit out for equipment, flooring. I always remind whether you're looking at starting a location or expanding second locations, your flooring is just as expensive as your equipment. I remember seeing that broken down as we started mapping out costs and realized that, the because in a training gym, we know the amount of equipment we need is actually, compared to other gym models, is actually pretty small. And so the flooring ends up being a pretty significant part of the budget that sometimes we forget about. Um, and then, the third piece I would add, which was certainly probably the biggest, didn't take the most logistical time, but it was certainly the hardest, was finding a head coach. And so this model that we're running works off of a head coach and an assistant coach. So they're both full time. And again, going back to like personal benefit, one of the reasons that I didn't want to do second location and future locations was, again, that idea of bouncing around to multiple locations. So we wanted to make sure that we could hire somebody that they could kind of treat it as their baby, and we would not, Josh or I, would not have to be actively coaching in the business. Certainly, Josh is involved in operations, and I'm involved on the marketing side of things, but I didn't want to physically be there once it was built out. That was a big guardrail of mine. And so we went through all the pains, like many of you probably face, of hiring, where, put out the job posting, sift through the applications as they come in, all the way to, we had, I think it was three, our fourth one. We went through three that actually accepted the job, and then after accepting, backed out. And finally, on the fourth one, we found our rock star. So, yeah, that was some of the bigger nuggets, going from idea to concept, or from concept to implementation.
So I think that, I mean, hindsight's 2020, but you touched on a couple things there that probably are really important for gym owners, and most of the people listening to this are or watching this are, they already have a location, but when you're looking towards it, it feels long. Everything feels long. Build out, hiring, waiting on things to materialize. And we're talking about like a lease or a purchase or something like that. But I mean, if we look back, I mean, the window's pretty short, and it, I think sometimes that impatience early on can really be a hindrance to us. But I mean, if you look back, you're like, man, and I mean, what's the total from, hey, we're doing this, to we're open? What's the total amount of time? Like, I mean, are we talking 6 months? Are we talking?
Yeah, it was less than, I look back. It was basically in we're recording this on, early July, and we just opened up this week, and we originally started the idea basically in the new year, so January. So I mean, we're talking at max 6 months, and really the first month or two we're just kind of bouncing ideas around. There wasn't actually any effort until call it even four months.
So when any of us business owners are looking at, man, if I can just keep my head down and stay focused, man, the amount of, I mean, you brought a brand new, fresh idea that, frankly, a lot of it was just conceptual. It's not like you had ever run a 1,500 square foot gym before, a mornings only gym before, a two-person team gym before. like you brought that fully to fruition and actually opened in 4 to 6 months, depending on what you kind of think of as the starting point. But we'll see people time and time again just fumble around and tread water for far more than that because they're unwilling to stay the course. They jump from this to that to the next thing. But and this, to be fair, we see this a lot with the people who are in Project 500. We see it a lot with people in boardroom. Well, the people who do well, and really both of those groups in their entirety, they have a degree of focus and they just keep their head down and implement. And this has been that to a T. And man, I mean, you faced this has not been seamless, like not at all. Like you faced the back and forth of 3 people accepting the job and not coming through. You, uh, had an agreement to buy a space that fell through and then went back to the drawing board and eventually got it done. So, I mean, I would never want somebody to miss. That's why I wanted to reiterate it. Like, it's not like you didn't experience bumps on the road in this 4 to 6 months either. You
Oh,
just
yeah.
kept pushing forward.
Yeah. My wife made a comment to me last night. We were sitting on the couch and she's like, it's nice to see you again. Because basically there's no denying the last 6 weeks were, especially the last six, right? I mean, there was a lot of the earlier work was, I could do it remotely. It's emails, figuring out, the agreement. It's you know talking to contractors on the phone about their estimates. It's I can navigate that with some flexibility. But once you have the actual physical space and you're there, actually setting it up and launching it. I mean, basically early mornings and then, coaching calls during the middle of the day and then back there at night. So it's certainly still that, which I personally, as much as it was stressful, I do think entrepreneurs like that kind of startup grind selfishly sometimes too. It's been a while since I had that. So that was fun, but also, as you said, certainly comes with its challenges and bumps.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's been fun to watch because, it's just not often you get to see something go from idea to fully executed. And, I mean, and I guess business is never fully executed, but to actual grand opening. Um, in that short a window and navigating all that goes into it. And, uh, I hope that everybody listening really takes it to heart, or everybody watching understands that. Man, I mean, it is very much designing the appropriate plan for you and your business and executing it and assuming there are going to be challenges and obstacles along the way, and just saying, man, that's just part of the path here. It's not, that there's not really, no matter how hard you try, there's no real way to avoid it because it's not all under your control. Like when equipment gets shipped isn't under your control, or flooring. When, somebody decides to take a job and then has a change of heart, not under your control. But if you stay focused, man, you can gain a whole lot of ground in a short period of time. So, um, before we wrap this episode up, are there any other important takeaways that you've had? Any lessons that you learned in this pretty abbreviated time frame?
Yeah, I mean the final things I maybe would wrap up that I hadn't touched on yet would be, um, there's the grand opening we'll certainly get to, but the financial investment, I think, right now there's a trend in our industry, at least I see it, with these kind of boutique franchises where people are dropping hundreds of thousands of dollars to open up a location. And transparently, like, ignoring the real estate side of it, like, we had our stuff open with like $53,000, I think was the total. Equipment, flooring, like in body, everything. And so, granted, I realize for the average gym owner, that's still a significant investment. But when you compare it to the several $100,000 that a franchise may take to get going, I just think that, there's not to say that I'm pushing everybody to open up multiple locations, but when we look at it, we were very diligent about what specific things we wanted in the facility that the client would benefit from, right? I think, I'm pretty far removed from it now, but I remember the days where I cared about the equipment for me because as a trainer, and I cared about having the nice equipment and the equipment that I more wanted than the client. And so just financially, I think that was something that we did that was I would say a good lesson in just talking to folks. I did a lot of kind of in my discovery time in those first couple of months. I tried to talk to as many gym owners that either had, multiple locations or franchises or anything like that. And that was a big one, is like the capital expenditure does not have to be as big as we think it needs to be. And then, the waiting, I would say the last thing, just to double down on the staffing. Our head coach is like, I can't emphasize, we have what I would consider to be a pretty strong onboarding program, but there's no denying that there's just natural ability that comes with a rock star. And, this kid is hungry. He has sales experience, so we don't really have to teach him sales, which is a win when you're running a location. He's personable. We found kind of that real A player. And in hindsight, I know we were getting antsy as we got closer to opening, like we don't have a head coach. We don't have a head coach. And, selfishly for me, it didn't really matter because Josh would step in. But Josh, I didn't want him to do that. And Josh would have had to step in. So he was getting antsy. And so just taking your time with hiring, I think is a lesson. Just continuing to, I think the growth trajectory that we've had, even in the last, 4 weeks, and we'll talk about pre-sale in the next episode, with his involvement versus a head coach that we would have hired that maybe was a great technical coach, but didn't have sales experience, didn't have whatever. It not only, I think, would have limited our initial growth, but it would have made Josh and I's roles a lot harder because we would have had to, I think, pick up a lot of that. So just taking your time on hiring would be a final lesson.
Well, I want to tack on maybe some more context to the first part of that. Okay, $53,000, not counting you buying the real estate, because it's a great investment, but a lot of people, that's maybe not even where they are right now. Um, we're talking, you're selling to a premium market. Like, what are your price points for small group training in that location going to be?
$99 a week. So shakes out to be about, just shy of 400 a month.
So, yeah, we're talking, yeah, this is not bare bones. This is not low cost boot campish type stuff. This is like, man, we're catering to a premium audience, high price points, good margins, doing it with that much in the game. So, um, I think that fortunately with some of the things we have coming down the pipeline, should be in a position to help some people explore that if that's something that's of interest to them too. So,
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
all right. Well, thanks for unpacking that, Doug. I think there's a ton in that episode, and for a lot of us as business owners, hopefully it reminds us to maybe urgency and patience aren't like mutually exclusive things. We can act with some urgency, but keep your head down. Usually you get to where you're trying to go. So awesome. All right. Thanks. And that's another episode of the Wealthy Gym Owners with Pat and Doug signing off.